Good morning, and welcome to the Alameda Connection on KCSM HD2. I'm your host, Scott Peeler. Every Sunday morning on the Alameda Connection, we highlight the best of the Bay Area's island city. Today's episode definitely falls into the best kept secrets files. And since you're listening to the radio, I think you're going to want to stay tuned. Because on 2152 Central Avenue, you'll find the California Historical Radio Society. Yes, it's a museum filled with some amazing historical artifacts and some absolutely gorgeous equipment from throughout the decades. But it's also the home of the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame and of one of the more fun events of the year, Radio Day by the Bay. I spent some time talking with Executive Director Rachel Lee about the many things that make California Historical Radio Society well worth the trip to Alameda, from radios that look like food to equipment that was actually used by the Navajo Code Talkers. Oh, good morning, Rachel, and welcome to the Alameda Connection.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing well, and I think of the guests so far, you are the one who had to travel the least. I mean, you did have to walk upstairs from your office.
I did, but it's a short flight.
And speaking of walking and this building, I cannot tell you the number of people in Alameda, and we're talking native Alamedans, people who have been here for years, and I will talk to them about CHRS, and they will say, yeah, I've walked by there a bunch of times.
Yeah, but never come in or never even noticed. When I first started working here in September of, this is actually my anniversary,
Okay.
September of 2023, I would tell people where I worked and they go, oh, never heard of it. And I'd say, well, it's just down from the high school. And they're like, oh, well, I know where that is. Never heard of it.
Right. For people who have been walking by for a number of years, what is it? Really, what is behind the literal facade? And we'll talk about the literal facade in a moment.
Sounds good. Yeah, so when you walk in, we are the California Historical Radio Society. What you will first see when you come in is our great room, which is a museum dedicated to the technology and artifacts of radio. Then additionally, throughout our 7,000 square foot building, we've got the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame, which is a room dedicated to the human side of radio, the broadcasters, and the radio stations. We have a broadcasting room. We have a repair shop. We have a tube vault. We have a hall of communications dedicated to point-to-point communications, military communications, aviation, maritime. We have a television section, and we have the largest radio-related library west of the Mississippi.
And for those of you who have not been here and you're thinking radio, but the TV exhibit, I have friends. I was talking with Evan Philippi from Pacific Pinball, and that's actually his favorite part.
Absolutely. Oh, it's fantastic. And it's interesting because the subject matter experts who curated that exhibit chose the items that they chose mostly for their technological interest rather than visual. And so what you have there is an array of really fascinating pieces, each of which was really pivotal at the time.
And that's what amazes me is the curation. The people who curate this museum are incredible because you don't have to be a radio person to come in and go, whoa, that's something else.
What we have here is an incredible collection, and what you see is only the tip of the iceberg. We have so much in storage that is beyond what we even show. But when you come in, there is a warmth that I think a lot of traditionally curated museums lack. We have a lot of stuff. It's warm wood. It gives you that feeling of gathering around the radio and of the importance in the change in communications from 1900 up to today.
The archives and the tube archives, I'm a big science fiction fan, and I just think that this is going to be somewhere in the movie when they say, if only we had this tube, we could communicate with the aliens. It will be here.
It will be here. Yes. So on the premises, we house over 50,000 tubes.
Oh, my goodness.
And it may even be more than that. But in our tube vault, we have sorted and have identified and separated and, for the most part, tested probably over 5,000 tubes. So that is a constant source of work for our volunteers. And it's an amazing space because they don't make, for the most part, they don't make tubes anymore.
Right.
And they certainly don't make the kinds of tubes that were used in vintage radios anymore. And so to have this space where we can be really selective about the radios that are the tubes that we choose to keep is amazing, and have such a wealth of them that they will last our radios for years and years into the future.
And a lot of folks don't realize, and when I came in from the East Coast, I wasn't aware of this as well, but people will refer to the Bay Area as the birthplace of broadcasting.
Doc Harold broadcast out of San Jose, and his radio station was really the first to do a regular broadcast. Now, it's not considered the first radio station because he was not licensed until later.
Okay.
And for the most part, Doc Harold was more of a tinkerer or a
Mhm.
hobbyist, but his wife was spinning 78s in the evenings. So on the West Coast, the first DJ was a woman.
Oh, wow.
And they were putting out regular programming. So there were so many firsts relative to radio broadcasting and technology that happened on the West Coast, specifically in the Bay Area.
I love the story that's on the website on the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame part of the site where it talks about Doc having to sell the station on the condition that the San Jose First Baptist Church tags everything with "This is KQW, pioneer broadcasting station of the world, founded by Dr. Charles D. Harold in San Jose in 1909."
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And I think one other thing that's really special about that radio station is it's still on the air today.
Really?
Yes, it is the legacy station for KCBS.
That is amazing. Now, CHRS itself, where we are, goes back to 1974. So how do we get from there to here?
So in 1974, CHRS was swap meets in parking lots. It was a lot of people involved in the tech industry, engineers, that sort of thing, who had this interest in radio. They'd meet in parking lots, they'd trade radios and parts and ideas and information, and it grew from there. In 2003, they sort of had a place land in their lap. The KRE building in Berkeley became available. And so at that time, they decided, you know what, we really should have a space. So they moved into the KRE building in Berkeley and started. Well, first off, they had a huge facilities project on their hand. But once they got past that, they made it into a museum space. They had exhibits, they had labels, and people could come and see. The problem with the KRE building in Berkeley is that it's very far off the beaten path.
Okay.
Fast forward 10-ish years, 2014, the ownership of the KRE building in Berkeley changed, and the new owners had big plans that didn't include us. And so at that time, CHRS did a major capital campaign, raised over $1 million, and purchased this building in Alameda because after having to move out of that one, they said, we don't want to do that again. So we purchased this building. Once again, had a very large facilities project on our hands. This building was built in 1900 and was the original Alameda Telephone Exchange.
Wow.
Yeah, so it has this very cool history, and we have pictures of it. We have pictures from the 1930s of the interior of the building fully staffed by women at the switchboards. It's a very, very neat. If you come for a tour, you'll get to see all of those things.
My favorite story about the women working the telephone exchange is that it was built, men started running it, but when the women came in, then the kitchen went in.
Well, yes, yes. So the story goes, and I have some questions about the story, but the way the story goes is that when telephone started in 1900, it was several hours a day and manned by men.
Okay.
And then over time, a woman would substitute for her husband, her brother, whatever, and people liked the sound of a woman's voice better. And so then over time, it became fully staffed by women. Now, I suspect there was a pay difference that might have
I'm shocked.
pushed that forward a little bit. But in the 1920s, now all of a sudden, telephone was 24 hours a day and fully staffed by women. So at that time, specifically in this building, an addition was put onto the back. And we assumed that the addition was a boarding space.
Okay.
So with that boarding space came a kitchen.
Got it.
And of course, one of my favorite exhibits is in our kitchen. We have a set of shelves that are filled with what appears to be food products, but every item on that shelf is a radio.
And it is incredible. I love that exhibit. Whiskey bottles, beer bottles, soda bottles.
Yes, we have a well-stocked radio bar.
Absolutely. So, got the new place. Got a big project to get it going on.
That's right. So it didn't quite take 10 years, but 10 years hence, this is fully open and ready. The front of this building from the 1960s through 2024 was concrete and block. In 1900, when it was built, it was California Mission Revival. after it was the telephone exchange, when the telephone exchange outgrew this building, they moved several doors down where they still are today.
Right.
The AT&T building is where they moved, been there ever since. After it was the telephone exchange, it was purchased by Church of the Nazarene, and they were the ones who in the 1960s, I guess, decided they didn't want that fusty old 1900 Mission Revival front, so they shaved the entire front of the building off and put up this facade. Now, when CHRS purchased the building from a child care facility, which is what it was after it was the church, when they purchased it, they knew there were some elements of the original facade left because they'd done enough demolition to know that the columns were still there, but we just didn't know how much.
Right.
We were lucky enough in 2023 to receive a large donation that allowed us to go on ahead and do the final step of the refurbishment of this building and take the facade off and recreate the original front. When we took the facade off, the details that are part of that Mission Revival were absent. They had been shaved off, but we could see where they were. They were still visible, just missing. And so through the work of several people, but specifically Steve Cushman, he very lovingly rebuilt the entire front true as possible to its original facade or its original front, and that's what you can now see today.
Did you have any photographs to guide you in that?
We had one photograph that was in the archives of AT&T, which is located in San Antonio, Texas, which is where I lived prior to moving here. So that was kind of a fun reference to go back and forth with. But yes, they had that picture and also the picture of the women working in the exchange.
You mentioned earlier that this is also the home of the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. Let's talk about that for a little bit. How old is that, and who's in it? Things like that.
Yeah, so this is the 20th year of the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame. We have our induction ceremony on August 18th. The way that works is there's a nominations process, which is open year-round. Anybody can nominate any broadcaster at any time. There is a set of selection criteria, but in short, it must be a Bay Area terrestrial broadcaster who has made an indelible mark on the history of radio or on radio. And the way the phrasing goes is you can't tell the story of Bay Area radio and not mention this person.
Got it.
So nominations happen, and then out of those nominations, they cull the list, because obviously people are nominated multiple times, into one set list, and then that is sent out for voting. The people who are allowed to vote are the current members of Barhoff and the CHRS members. So anybody who's a member of CHRS or a member of Barhoff can vote in that election. Once the votes are in and tallied, then the announcement is made of who the new class of Barhoff will be for that year.
Is it just individuals, or are stations put into the Hall of Fame?
So it is just individuals for the Barhoff, but every year we also nominate a station. So this past year it was Radio Keene out of San Jose. The year before that it was KDFA, the classical station, and so on. So every year there is a process for nominating the legendary station. In addition, we also have the Don Sherwood Award, which is sort of a listener's choice award. And people get nominated into that as well.
I suppose I have to ask, considering where we're doing this, so a few KCSM people in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
What are some of the names that people who are just casual fans would recognize as these people are in the Hall of Fame?
So we have historical figures such as Don Sherwood, Wally King, etc. But the modern broadcasters that you may recognize, Stan Bunger, John Evans, Rosie Lee Allen.
Got to meet Rosie here. She's a delight.
She is a delight. She is one of my favorite members of the Hall of Fame.
Your background is not in radio.
Correct.
But here you are, and actually you're the first full-time employee here, right?
That is correct.
So what brings, where'd you come from? How'd you get here?
So I went to Trinity University in San Antonio, Texas, and got a degree in math. After I received my degree, I taught math for a number of years. So I was in education. I taught middle schoolers and then eventually taught college at Palo Alto College. During that time, I also worked with nonprofits a lot. Started off in the Junior League of San Antonio, worked all the way up to be a board member of the Junior League, worked with some ballet organizations. I also danced professionally. So have sort of these weird facets,
Right,
right,
right.
that all kind of come together. And then additionally, while in San Antonio, I owned my own business. So when I moved here, we moved here peak COVID. We moved June 2020.
Oh,
we,
perfect.
we were going the opposite direction of everybody else. So we were under a rock for a little while. And upon coming out of our rock, I also have 3 children. So I was doing remote schooling and all these kinds of things. I was like, I have got to do something else.
Right.
So I started off by getting involved with my children's school. Again, more nonprofit work. Ended up working with the Alameda Civic
Hmm.
Ballet and sit on their board. I'm now their board president. And finally I was like, I just need employment.
Right.
I just want to work. So I applied to a whole lot of different places because I started applying when the employment market really when the bottom fell out of
Right,
it.
right.
I applied to what was available, but the average tech company just could not parse my resume with what
Right.
I could do for them. So finally, at one point, this listing came up and I went, "Ooh, it's a nonprofit. Oh my gosh, it's in Alameda. It's in radio. Huh. I'll have to learn about that." And during the interview process, I specifically said to the board, look, I know about business, I know about education, I know about running a nonprofit. What I do not know about is radio. And they said, oh, yeah, that's fine. We have all of that knowledge here. We don't need any more of that knowledge. We can give you what you need of that knowledge. And so I said, yeah, then let's do this. This is great.
It's kind of like some of the current coaches in the NFL. They never played the game, but boy, are they good at Madden.
Right,
And
exactly.
it works.
Yeah.
My first introduction to CHRS was actually before I lived in Alameda. In 2021, I was touring the country, and we happened to go to the Hornet on Memorial Day,
Ah,
and CHRS was out there
yes.
with a bunch of them. Well, that's kind of interesting. It seems like since that point, and obviously since you came, it seems like y'all are doing a whole lot more.
When I first came on here, again, as I said, people, I would tell them where I'd work, never heard of it.
Right.
So step one, I was like, we've got to get out there. So I really tried to implement a campaign for people just to know who we were.
Hmm.
We really upped our game on outreach.
Hmm.
And so that was step one. And then some of the additional things that I wanted to do were to start a summer camp. And finally, this past summer, that was realized.
I may or may not have been involved in
You may or may not. You may have been involved in
that.
that specifically. Yeah, so we had 2 camps this past summer. The first was a broadcasting and media camp,
Hmm.
which would be the one you know about.
Right.
And then we also had an electronics camp, and both were incredibly successful. We really did something we'd never done before, which was super fun, and brought these really interesting pieces to youth in the area.
And it was so much fun being part of that broadcasting and podcasting course because in another part of my life, I do a news podcast for the Alameda Post here on the island. I was able to take some of the students and incorporate them into that, which was a huge thrill. And what was interesting is there was all the groups together had to come up with some sort of show. And there was one group of young women who they are going to be the next investigative news reporting team
Yeah,
in
they
the
were
Bay Area.
fantastic. They were fantastic. It was such fun, and what a cool piece of media to have with you that you put together, you wrote, you edited, you
Right.
produced. I mean, how often do you get to do that as a middle schooler?
Now, do you find what I'm seeing with some of the other older musics or technology or whatever that the current generation that's growing up, I call them time agnostic because they have access to the internet. It doesn't matter. You listen, you see what's on their phone for music, and it's something from the '60s, something from the '70s, a couple of the latest things from Doja Cat, and oh yeah, I got these 3 '90s bands that I like. So do you see that when younger people come into the museum, they go, oh, that's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, they find the thing that interests them, be it the technology stuff in our electronics lab, be it the microphones that are in here, be it the 1920s consoles, like whatever it is, there's there's something here for everybody. There is an interest that can be piqued no matter what.
You were talking about outreach, and if people have never been to Radio Day by the Bay, that's turned into quite something. Let's talk about that.
Before I was hired, I went to Radio Day by the Bay, and it was this tiny little event and interesting, but I was like, there's so much that CHRS has to offer. This should grow. And being an event here in Alameda, Alamedans come to Alameda events.
Yes.
So I was like, the fact that nobody knows who this is, and we put on this event every year, we need it to grow. So, because we have such a special 4th of July parade,
Hmm.
I got us into the parade
Okay.
and we printed off 5,000, I think, postcards inviting people to Radio Day by the Bay. The year before I was hired, when I came to Radio Day by the Bay, they had about 250 attendees.
Okay.
Then, after we advertised the following year, we doubled it. We got to 500 attendees. Well, now that it's a bit of a known event and people have seen it before, this past year, we did the same thing. 4th of July parade, invited everyone on the route. And this past year, we had over 1,000 attendees.
And I have to say that it was personally very rewarding because it was at Radio Day by the Bay where I met Dr. Robert Franklin from KCSM.
That's
and
right.
This is why the Alameda Connection exists. So it was bravo,
Absolutely.
well done.
Yes. And that's one of the other things that I think is really important from an industry standpoint.
Mhm.
If you can get all of these people in the same room, or in our case, parking lot,
Right.
these kinds of connections will happen. I think so often all of these organizations are trying to do something similar and operating in a silo. We need to connect. We need to develop these networks and grow from that.
A question, actually, this one actually comes from my wife, who is another ex-radio person. I like CHRS. What do they need from someone who maybe isn't a diehard, isn't into the minutia, doesn't get deep into the weeds, but just think this is something that is worth having and worth being around? How do they help you?
Absolutely. So there's 3 things that we ask for from the person asking themselves
Hmm.
that: time, treasure, or talent.
Okay.
Time. There are so many ways in which to volunteer at CHRS that are not doing something radio specific. We have things that need to be cataloged, things that need to be archived, things that need to be cleaned, a store that could use organization. I mean, if you have an interest, we probably have a way in which to channel that into something at CHRS. You like putting on events? We have a lot of events. Like, you name it, we can use it. You're organized, we can find a place for you. So that's time. Treasure. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We can use treasure of all kinds. Obviously, donations. That's the low-hanging fruit for that
Right.
one. But maybe you have this interesting piece of equipment, or your grandfather's old radio or whatever. So many of the donations that we receive, we cannot put in our museum. But we can electronically refurbish it. We can add a Bluetooth component, and we can take it to an antique fair,
Hmm.
or we can sell it online. So there's options there. Memorabilia. We've started doing memorabilia auctions. So we received an incredible donation from Cumulus Radio when
Hmm.
they changed office buildings. And we got all of this signed memorabilia that we were then able to auction off. So that's, the
Right.
treasure element. And then talent. So let's say you're a marketing professional. We could use some of your time. Let's say you're, whatever industry that you are in, perhaps you could donate a little of your expertise to help us in an area where we do not currently have that expertise.
What is your favorite piece in the
Oh
museum?
gosh. Well, it's funny when we walk around the museum and we get to any area, I go, oh, and this is my favorite piece. And then we move on to the next one. And this is another one of my favorite pieces. I'll try to do it really fast. Let's see here. I love our 1900 telephone booth from
Okay.
our 1900s exhibit.
Which works.
Which works, yes. You can make a phone call on it. It's awesome. I teach the children why it's called dialing and why it's called hanging up, and it's mind-blowing. In the 1920s exhibit, my favorite part of that is the speaker display. So we have a 1920s 3-dialer radio that you can turn on. So on a vintage 100-year-old piece of equipment, you can listen to a modern broadcast, and then we can switch the signal to a speaker display, and you can listen to the same signal on 8 different
Oh,
radios.
cool.
I love that. In our 1930s display, we have a 1930s remote control.
Oh,
It's
wow.
this big, clunky, wireless remote control, and you dial it like a telephone,
Oh, my
and
goodness.
it sends the signal to the console, and then it sends a radio signal to send that signal, and then it mechanically moves the dial to whatever you just tuned in. And because it's so big and clunky, it has the added benefit it'll never get lost in the couch cushions. In the broadcasting room, my favorites are the NBC chimes, the West Coast NBC
Right.
chimes, and the 1942 Wurlitzer Victory Jukebox.
Which is gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. Downstairs in the Hall of Communications, we have the same radio direction finder that was used by Amelia Earhart. We have the Gibson Girl. We
Right.
have the Navajo Code Talker transceiver, which is absolutely one of my favorites.
And what did I see just the other day? There are only two left. 2 of the code talkers left with us, the
Correct.
people.
Yes,
And so
the people.
That's a treasured piece of history.
Yes, and hopefully we're going to be able to put together an exhibit specifically on that bit of technology.
Wonderful.
So that is exciting. We also have Vietnam era spy radios. And then, of course, in our television display, we have a 1929 mechanical TV reproducer. I love that piece. We have a 1951 Royal Sovereign Dumont, which is the largest black and white TV ever produced. In our library, we have a whole section devoted to juvenile fiction that's about radio. So
wow.
the Radio Boys or whatever these early fiction items. So I don't have one favorite
Right.
piece. I have lots of favorite pieces.
I think one of the pieces you mentioned that, and I've researched it further. We're not sure if the story is apocryphal or not, but the NBC chimes musically are the notes GEC.
Correct.
General Electric Corporation
Yes.
Ownership Group.
Yes.
So
That's one of my favorite also aha moments when people are coming through here.
I've said this to a lot of my guests here. What's your elevator pitch? How do you get them in the door?
Anybody can find interest here because CHRS has curated and preserved communication history from wired to wireless to tube amplification to the first broadcasts to transistors, which are what's in your cell phone today. Your cell phone is just a bunch of radios. They're
Right.
just really small. So we still use radio technology. It is 100% currently relevant. And we are housing the history of it up to now. And so, I think that's valuable, especially if you grew up in the East Bay and you listened to all these radio stations, but especially if you didn't.
Right.
I think there's something here for everybody. So, and just to come in, I've never had anyone come in here and act like it was a waste of time.
Right.
If people just think, oh, they'll look for a minute, it's either I've got to come back or I've got to call someone and let them know I'm going to be a little longer.
So what are your operating hours?
So we are open 10 to 3 on Wednesdays and Saturdays. We also are open for tours by appointment. So I'm here usually about 6 days a week. So if you email me, rachel@chrsradio.org, we can set up a tour for you to come see all the incredible things held within.
And what is the admission fee?
It's free.
So
Yes.
we'd appreciate a donation, but come on by, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Rachel Lee, Executive Director of the California Historical Radio Society. This is a lot of fun, and we could go on for hours, but they're the old clock on the wall, as they used to say. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks again to Rachel Lee, Executive Director of the California Historical Radio Society, not only for sitting down with us, but for graciously providing a place to have our interview. Again, the California Historical Radio Society is located at 2152 Central Avenue here in Alameda. They're open Wednesdays and Saturdays from 10 until 3 and also by appointment. You can find them online at californiahistoricalradio.com. If you've got an idea for an Alameda feature for the Alameda Connection, shoot me an email at alamedaconnection@gmail.com. Also, you can follow the show on Instagram at Alameda Connection. As always, our theme music is the song Beachside Isle It's by jazz guitar player Bill Hart, and it's from his album Watch the Sky. I'm Scott Peeler, and I'll see you next Sunday morning on KCSM HD2 for the latest episode of the Alameda Connection. See you then.